Thank you all for your time today. The webinar is presented by Aptus Business Solutions on the topic of conducting year-end in Sage 300 Cloud. My name is Stacey Orrick, a Sage consultant with Aptus Business Solutions, working with Sage 300, Sage Intacct, Sage CRM, Sage X3, and I've got over 25 years experience in doing Sage 300 year-ends. So yes, that makes me really old. I also have Georgia, who's our marketing assistant here, and she's helping me just to run the webinar today. Okay, so let's begin. Sage 300 makes year-end processing simple, as it's a date-sensitive accounting system designed to have multiple years of history and allow for you to post back and forth to multiple years. And this is all controlled by that locking through the Common Services fiscal calendars. So let's talk briefly to start with about how the year-end process actually works and what it does. Okay, year-end does a number of different things. Firstly, it changes a current fiscal year to the next year and allows for the posting in the general ledger to proceed. So you can see here in this screenshot with the GL setup options on the posting tab that it's going to move that current fiscal year into the new financial year. And without the system doing this, that's where we get most of those common error messages that you'll get messages from your users about, where it's users are trying to post journals on a Sage system that's not undergone their year end yet, and it's that warning, incorrect procedure, cannot post to a future year. So that's the first thing that the year end process does, is roll that. Secondly, in relation to the balance sheet accounts and retained earnings accounts, it sets the system so that the closing and opening balances are the same. And you can see that from this example on the sheet, that this could be a step that you do at the end of year end. You have a little look and you go, okay, if I'm running it for the end of the prior year, what were my balances? And then if I have a look, what are they in the new financial year? That's with the closing ones there. Okay, thirdly, in relation to the income and expense accounts it creates and posts a batch of GL transactions to close these accounts and resets the income and expense accounts to ensure they've got opening balances of 0 in the new financial year. And you can see that as well in this screenshot below. So it's doing true accounting, and it's what you'd expect it to do with the income and balance sheet accounts. This next slide is just an example of what one of those closing journals that's created by the system looks like. And you can see there that we've got a source code of GLCL, and this is all reserved for the system for those closing entries only. Okay, so if you do come across one of these batches and you wonder what it is, it's been created by that year-end process. Okay. Now that you understand a little bit more about what the year-end process is going to do, let's talk about some of the important things at this time of year you're probably starting to ask yourself. So the first one is when should I perform year-end? Over the years, many of our clients have waited until they've finalised all their entries prior to rolling the year-end. And this can sometimes mean that this does not occur for some time. Some of our clients might say their auditors don't come through till September. And what that means is that from now till September, you won't be able to run any reports out of your general ledger. Okay, without a system in its new financial year, you can't post anything in the GL. So you lose the ability to report out of your general ledger. So there's absolutely no reason for this delay, and we encourage you to perform year end as soon as possible. There's no reason you cannot do it first thing Wednesday morning, 1st of July, 2021. The only implication of doing your year end before all entries are complete is that every entry dated pre-1 July 21 will create extra entries when posting and can slightly slow the system down a little bit, but you wouldn't even notice it as a user. And that's a small disadvantage when you weigh up that you can't post into your general ledger and report. Okay, the next question would be, what happens if I need to put an entry back into a prior fiscal year? So we talked about at the start that Sage 300 is a perfect system for having multiple years and periods open. So once a fiscal period or year is closed, you can still post entries back if you've got the rights to go and open and close those fiscal periods and years. So you can do this at any time. There's certainly no hard cutoff. What you've just got to think about is the accounting impacts within your organisation about doing that. Have I already reported those reports to someone? Me opening this, what is it going to affect? So you need to have a think about that. Okay, when you do the Sage 300 rollover and you're needing to post back, this is just an example of what a journal will look like if it's been posted, it goes back, and the extra little entries that it's going to post on the bottom. Okay, so again, you can see that they've got that GL, CL, and we've got that extra bit of a journal at the bottom. Okay. Okay, the next question, can I post my year-end adjustments to a separate period? Okay, so you may or may not know, but Sage 300 functionality supports a number of periods. And fiscal period 13 is reserved for when you're using a 4-week calendar. So traditionally, I see most of our clients use just 12 fiscal periods. Fiscal period 14 is the adjustment period that can be used for adjusting entries. And fiscal period 15 is used by the system to do the closing entries. Okay, you can't do a journal to that yourself. The system uses that one. And that's what we saw on some of those screens previously. Those period 15 transactions, they're not really available in any of the standard reports in Sage 300. They can probably be picked up by the business intelligence tools, but Sage Financial Reporter uses the BAL close and net close functions to report on those, but they're just totals. There's not too much individual transaction detail there. So I get this call a lot, and a lot of clients will actually ask me, why should I use fiscal period 14? And the benefits of using fiscal period 14 are that some clients prefer to be able to separately flag their adjustment entries so that they can prepare unaudited and audited reports. So you could run your report up to period 12, that would be unaudited, audited journals go into period 14, then you could run reports that included that. So it also allows you to keep your final operating period free from large year-end accounting adjustments. And this sort of preserves year-over-year comparability for that period. Also, using a 14th period allows you to lock a previous year's regular periods to avoid accidental entries. So this is the most common thing that happens at this time, is you want to be closing off and people are still processing in their system. So you could close off the standard period 12 so that people can't do that and they need to come to you and you could be doing any adjustments in period 14. Okay, so you can't, this is only available in the general ledger. You can't sort of do it in any of the sub-ledger modules though. You can't sort of post an entry to period 14 in accounts payable. Okay. Okay. So after you've considered these questions, there's a number of things that you can start doing in the lead up to year end. And that's what's in that handout that we sort of referred you to on the right-hand side that you can download. And I'm going to go through all these steps all in one hit when I do a bit of a demonstration. So I'm going to just talk about them and then we'll talk about them a little bit more when I show them to you on screen. So the first thing you can start to do is have some internal discussions about selecting a year-end date. Discuss with your team dates for cutting off the entry transactions into your system. So for example, any accounts payable invoices that come in after the 7th of July, they're going to be entered into the new financial year. Okay, so work out what's the actual day that you'll be performing your year end and also communicate that to your staff so they know what plan they can work to. It's also a good time to be telling and making users aware to start to batch up entries that cross fiscal periods. Okay, because you're going to get that warning if someone tries to post something if the fiscal year is not being created. You're better off trying to batch those up into separate batches so that you can minimize those error batches when you're posting to the GL. Okay, you can also create that new fiscal calendar. And on the first day of a new year, you may not be ready to close your GL, but you're going to want to certainly continue processing transactions in your sub-modules. Okay, so for example, you're going to want to continue raising sales invoices or accounts receivable or order entry invoices. And to do this, you're going to have made sure that in the fiscal calendar, you've created the new fiscal period. If you don't see that icon under Common Services, it's just that you don't have rights and you need to talk to whoever does have them about this. Now, this is something you could even go and do today, okay? You could go and create the new fiscal calendar and lock the fiscal periods, and it'd be one thing off your task list. And just as I sort of mentioned before, make sure you definitely lock them, okay? This is where I also get a lot of clients who accidentally post into the wrong fiscal periods at this time. Okay, this is a really important one. Okay, you need to check the number of years of history that your Sage 300 system can maintain. Now, whilst the premium edition, which is the top tier version of Sage 300, can have 99 years of history, and the other editions can only have 7, it depends what's been set in your setup options, okay? So you must go and check that, because if you roll year end with that setting incorrect, and this might be your 7th or 8th year of running, it will start to clear history, regardless of whether you want to or not. And there's no going back from that. If you ring me in a week and go, whoops, when we ran year end, we cleared history, the best I'm going to be able to say to you is we need to restore a backup from over a week ago. Okay, so there's no going back from this one. So that's an important one to check. Also, we're going to check the retained earnings account. And this is the account to which the Create New Year process closes all the income and expense accounts to that are not specifically assigned to another retained earnings account. You can change the default closing account before doing year end, and so it's definitely worth checking, and I'll show you in a minute in setup options where to do that. There is a whole other area that if you're running multi-segments in your chart and you needed to close to multiple retained earnings and you're not sure how to do that or to set that up, then please give me a call and I can talk you through that. It doesn't affect a lot of our clients, but some of you I do know that it does. Okay, check your chart of accounts. Now, one of the most common problems clients call me about is that after year end's been done, some of the P&L accounts that should have been cleared still have balances. And this is because if the account type is flagged incorrectly, the year-end process doesn't know which accounts to roll to the retained earnings account. And once year-end's been done, you just can't rerun it, okay? The only way to correct this is to restore to a backup or journal the balances out of that account. So most clients would notice if they've set up an incorrect account during the year just because their probably financial reports would have been flagging that account in the wrong category. But sometimes it can happen in the speed of year end. Someone might be creating a lot of new accounts. So to avoid this, export the chart of accounts and check them all. And we'll have a look at that as well in my demonstration. Okay, probably a little bit early, but probably coming up to about the, even the 24th or 25th of June, you could probably look at turning off the automatic posting. Now, over the years, Sage has introduced different options for posting, and some of you would have the flags turned on to post. If you post in accounts payable, it will automatically post the general ledger. So if you haven't opened up your new fiscal year and accounts payable tries to do that, you're just going to end up with lots of error batches in your general ledger. So some clients will turn that automatic posting off just to avoid those error batches. Now, is it bad that I'm getting error batches? No, it's just going to throw a user, and again, I get a lot of calls about that. And all you do after you've done your year end is you just go back and post those batches. Okay. Also, another thing just to think about is if you're going to put any journals into the system that are set to auto reverse in period 1 of fiscal year 21, then these batches are going to throw error batches. Okay, they can't post. They don't know about this future year yet because you haven't run year end. So don't be alarmed. They can be posted once year end's complete. But again, it's just another good one that you can give those users a heads up on so that they don't feel like there's an error being generated. Talk to IT about backups and data integrity. This one I can't stress enough. I talk to our staff internally about backups all the time. Now, you only need to have been burnt once by a backup process to make this one of your most important conversations you'll have in your organisation. I'm really surprised that a lot of clients that I talk to don't know their backup routines, okay? They've never been tested and they've never had to actually go through the process of retrieving one from IT or restoring it, okay? So this is a great time of year to go and speak to whoever's responsible for backing up your system. Now, if you don't know who to speak to, then that's also a bit of a problem. But you can start with us. We might be able to help you out in that area. But what you need to do is think about that if you had to recover quickly, how quick will your IT respond? How quickly do they respond to, that it's an urgent thing? How many days could you actually go back if you needed to? Most clients, most IT guys or girls will say let's set 3 days worth of backups. And that means every 3 days your backup's getting clobbered. And so if you think about that, if that happens, if you back up on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it's going to back up. Monday, you've really lost the ability to either go back to Thursday or Friday. So you really need to talk about, are they keeping one once a month? Are they keeping them any longer? And just have a chat to them so that you know what you can do. Obviously, we also want to make sure that that integrity of the data is good as well. If you're not running integrity checks in Sage 300, let us know and we can talk to you about showing you where they are. Okay, most of you all would be running SQL, and that means your IT has to do the backup. However, users can do their own backups by doing a Sage database dump. What you need to do though is possibly contact your IT about making sure there's enough space. We have had instances where clients have done backups themselves and it filled up the server, and then that's created issues inside itself. So, but if you need any help or want to talk to us about where to start with that, it's a really, really, really important topic to talk about your backups. Okay. Also have a talk with your team about clearing any history. Year end is a great time to do a cleanup of data. However, it's not entirely necessary. You may only need to do it if there are speed or space issues. And this might just be as simple as clearing some posting journals or some historical data that's sitting there. One area that I think is definitely worth looking at is if you're using the bank reconciliations under common services, these areas really slow down and they can certainly benefit by clearing off the reconciled entries. So you can speak to us as well about performing any of those functions. One thing with clearing history is don't underestimate the time that might be required. Don't just think you're going to do it overnight sometimes. Depending on how long you've all been running, these processes can take a long time. It's also a good time of year to have a bit of a look at your month-end procedure. I go out to lots of different clients, not so much anymore with COVID, but over the years, I've seen a lot of users who they say, oh, I've got to print that and I've got to file that in this folder. They go, okay, why are you putting it in that folder and who's looking at it? And they don't really know, okay? So always try and improve your systems. Have a look at what you're doing and work out, do I still need to be doing this? It's all in the system. Who would be coming to look at it? And start to question that. But also with your month-end process, it should be about checking that your age trial balance balances to your GL debtors control account. Should be running your age payables report and checking it to your creditors account. Checking your bank account. So it's ticking off all those GL accounts that perform that reconciliation. And if you're not doing it monthly, year end's going to slow down because if you've got any anomalies, you've got to go back and find out what month it's in. So I'm pretty sure you'd all be doing this as a month-end thing, but if you need any help with that, let me know. Okay, we're nearly through all these admin parts, but some clients like to print reports before they do year end. They like to run the trial balance and they like to file it away that this was what it was at this point, and they like to check it afterwards. So if the only suggestion with running any of those reports is just maybe run them to file and put them on the network somewhere. Don't necessarily have to be paper copies these days. Okay. When you're getting ready to run day end and you know it's fairly imminent, run year end, make sure you've run your day end. We want to make sure we try and include all the entries that we can in that big batch process that when it runs and closes, okay? And that goes hand in hand with the next step, which is try and post all your batches, okay? Any that you leave open, they're going to allow you to post, but remember it's creating that big GLCL batch, and it's good to get in as much as you can into that batch. Okay, there are depending on your setups, and every client is unique and different, you would all be running different third-party products. Okay, there are some year-end functions in other modules and third-party products. Okay, so just looking at this screen, you can see that accounts payable here has a clear activity statistics, and these statistics relate to some of the inquiry screens. Now, if you're running those sort of processes, then they're time sensitive. You sort of need to run them as soon as you can, closer to 30 June, because if you're looking at it going, what is my highest balance this year, last year, those kind of things, we need to have reset them, okay? The other thing too is that we need to think about, I've got norming fixed assets. There's a year-end process in there. Should I run that year-end process? So that's always a good talking point to sort of contact us, say, hey, have I got any modules that I really should be putting into this process? Okay. Now, might have already mentioned this one, but I do love a good backup. I know I did just talk about backups, but you can never have enough backups, okay? It will always be that one time that you thought you'd be safe that you won't be. And just make sure that you've got a backup, that you've talked to IT, and that you do that backup before you do run year end. The last one is you won't be able to run your year end on the day that you choose to if all users are in the system, okay? It'll tell you when you go to run it that there's users in the system. So you need to communicate, work out a time that you'll be able to jump in and do the process. So, but what I want to do now is just quickly go into Sage 300 and just show you a few of the areas that I talked about. So I'm just going to jump into that screen. Excellent. So when I ran through all those things, I talked about a few areas in Sage 300. So I'm running Sage 300 2021 patch 2. That's what we're up to. If you are on lots lower versions, you perhaps need to be starting to have a talk with us, but this is the latest version that's possible at this stage. So under GL, General Ledger, GL Setup and GL Options, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and have a look and see what fiscal year I'm in. Okay, so this is set up, it's in 2020, and I can also see there that my system's been set to 3 years. So it's going to clear history, okay? So if you see that on yours, if you're not sure what version of Sage you're running, you can always just type in 99 and try and save it. If you can, it'll allow you to save, okay? Set it to as high a number as you can, okay? It will also tell you what year it's going to start to clear from, okay? Because that was going to be 2018 because I had 3 years here, okay? Now, the other thing to check while I'm just in here is on the account tab, and I can check my default retained earnings account. And that's where we sort of mentioned it could change that if you needed, but that's the one that's going to close everything too. When I hit the browser in here, I'll only be able to see accounts with retained earnings types. Okay. So I've checked those things. I'm happy with that. So you could even do that today. You don't sort of have to hold off on that one. The other thing that I mentioned to do was to go and check your GL accounts. So under General Ledger, GL accounts and accounts, you can sort of scroll through and have a look, or you can use the Finder key to have a look. Now, depending on how many accounts, you may actually want to export out of this screen and have a look. But what you'd be looking for is if there was an income sort of sitting in with these balance sheets, or if something was set up wrong. So it's definitely worth having a bit of a look just before you roll over. Now, I talked about turning off auto posting. So each of the modules that you run will have, say for example, accounts payable under AP setup, there's a GL integration, and it will be here that you could turn it back to creating a new batch. If your systems are creating and posting a new batch, the automatic posting is turned on. Some of the other things I mentioned was make sure that you've run day end. So you'd come into your system, come and run your day end process if you're running any of the inventory modules. And also to check what users are in the system, you can go up to help and about licenses and current users. Okay, so you'd be able to see the number of users that are in the system. If there was others in there, I could see what screens they had open. If I saw someone that only had a desktop, I could actually, if I was had the right rights and I had the right password, I can actually turn the tick on here and say that I want to sign out that user if I can see that it's someone just sitting in there that didn't close their session last night. So you can do that. Now, the other areas were under AP periodic processing, you'll see year-end functions, and you'll see that sort of in most of the modules. So if you needed to, you can have a look and run any of these processes. We don't tend to reset batch numbers anymore. However, I haven't seen anybody hit the limit of the batch number. At some point, if these are really long sites, they could hit that. You may clear the activity stats, or you might clear some of the other year-to-date statistics. But really, once you've done all those checks, and like I sort of mentioned, they could be done now, really all that has to happen when you come to run day end is you're going to go General Ledger, periodic processing, and create new year. And we can go on this screen when it comes up. It's going to give you my lovely warning again about a backup. And then I can see that it's going to roll me into the 2021 or 20, depending on how your fiscal years have been set up. And then it will warn you how many years of history it's going to clear, okay? So you can back out here and go and check that setup option if you'd forgotten to, but it's always definitely sort of that last spot to check here. And then all you're going to do is you're going to hit the process button. Okay, now don't underestimate this. If you've got, I've only got sample data, it's really short and it's whizzed through there. But if you've got a database with a lot of accounts, that could take some time. So what that's done then is if I had done any data in there, and I think I've already run year end on this database, it's going to go and it's going to create that closing GL batch. And that's what you should all be expect to be seeing after your year end's been completed. Okay, and then we get our batch and it's got our GLCLs and it has got those amounts there with all my source codes. So one thing I did just forget to show you there was that step that you can go back and do today, which is that common services fiscal calendar, and just check here what year that you're in, okay? So if you haven't got the fiscal period years open, all you're needing to do is hit the plus button there and it's going to create that new fiscal year. So I can hit add on there. Now, as I mentioned, always important to make sure that you lock the ones that are not in use yet. Now, this is sample data, so you're seeing a 1 January to December live date, okay? Yours will look possibly different to that. Just going to shoot back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so there's a few things to do after year end. If you've got any of those error batches sitting around, go and clean all those up, post them all. Print off a source journal report. That might be worth filing away or putting electronically. Some clients don't necessarily know about that one. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly show you about that. So under here, under my GL and setup, I'm going to go to source codes, source journal profiles. And let me just see if I've got one in here. No, we're going to just do a new one. I'm going to call it year end. Now this won't be a new system unless it's been set up previously. And I'm going to put that GLCL. Okay, remember that's my source code that all the closing entries inside the system get allocated to. And then I'm going to close that. And then what I can do is I can run a report called a source journal report. Now you may not have used this. These are good reports when you're looking for certain types of transactions. So for example, you might be looking for all the APINs across all the GL accounts within a certain date range. This would be a good screen to run that for. So I'm going to go to year end. I could narrow it down if I wanted to, but I can go to my ranges and I can choose my last financial year. And then you could choose a date range if you wanted to. And when you hit print, it's going to go and find all the journals inside the system with that GLCL. And I haven't got any for that period. I must have selected the wrong one. But what it is a great audit trail, because if you have reopened a fiscal period, gone back and put stuff back in, that journal batch that we saw got created, I've seen some clients do this. They'll print this, they'll give it to the auditors and they'll say, that's all my closing entries. But it won't be, in fact. If someone goes and do some new stuff, remember it's going to keep continuing to create those closing entries. So that batch alone would not be all the closing entries. The only way to get them all out would be that source journal report. Okay. So just jump back to this, sorry. Now we're nearly finished. Sorry, I know I'm just running a little bit over, so we won't go through all the other reports that you can possibly run. What I wanted to do though was let you know about some other resources that Sage 300 has. In the latest versions of Sage, all the help has gone to an online mode because it makes it easier for them to update. So you could log into Sage 300, go to help from the top menu, select product documents, and you can see that there's some checklists there. So they're available to you. You can also go to the year end center that's in Sage City. Okay, so there's documentation and access. If you don't know how to get to there, let us know. You guys can create logins, have a look at forums, get access to information. So it's a really important resource. The other thing too, if you're not aware of it, with your Sage software assurance, you get access to Sage University. A lot of the courses you may have to pay for, but at the moment I've noticed that there's quite a few free Sage 300 courses there. You can see this one when I just pulled it up. It's got a getting started with financials sort of course, okay? And you can see that they've cut the price back down to $0. So if you don't know how to get onto Sage University, give us a buzz and we can let you know. Okay, so final tips. I was going to sort of mention about your provisional posting. And the main thing with that is if you do not see provisional post on your GL screen there, that's a useful function. You need to turn it on though. So under GL setup options, there is under the posting tab, allow provisional posting. Now what that does is become a what if posting function, which is great around year end when you're doing some adjustments and you're not quite sure if it's the result that you want. When you post a journal and post it by clicking that post button, it will give you access to be able to run a trial balance with provisional included. Okay, and that will include any of the stuff in your general ledger journal without actually posting it. So if you weren't happy with the result, you could actually just go back to your journal and open it back up, make changes, or delete it, and then post it if you're happy with it. So the provisional post is quite a good function that I find most users don't use. The other thing, remember those third-party products, what year-end processes, what impacts, what do I have to think about there? Do I need to speak to my consultant about this? Don't underestimate the time you need. Getting a backup with IT, making sure that you've got your users out of the system. Make sure you allocate the time. Okay, there are also visual processes in the system that we could set up that might help you with this process. But just remember there's been a large development change in visual process flow. So if you were using them, they've stopped working. You need to update your Sage. It's because Adobe was ended support at the end of December 2020 of Flash Player. So you need to get on a supported version of Sage. Nearly there, we're just running through a few of the things that you just need to watch for and any errors that you might get. This is just a tip on how you're going to have to go and correct that entry, make the accounts active, inactive. So please make sure those GL accounts are set up correctly, otherwise you'll have a long process to sort of correct those. A lot of clients also ask me, hey, we're running a June to July financial year, but we would like to change to a January to December. Is that possible? Yes, there is a fiscal year-end change utility available. It's from a third-party vendor though, and it's a great process, but it's the only way that we can do it. We can't do it in standard Sage. These are just for your reference, a couple of things that always sort of come up. We talked about that cannot post to future year, the revenue and expense amounts not being rolled to retained earnings. These are the most common support cases that we sort of see around GL year end. And I accidentally duplicated that last one just to reinforce how important and how many calls I do get about that. Excellent. All right, well, I hope that's answered some questions. I hope it's reinforced some of those for all the people that have run this. We do run this webinar every year, so sorry if it does sound a bit repeated, but the process hasn't changed. So good luck and feel free to shoot me any emails and questions that you might have. Thank you for your time.